Our guest is Teresa Njoroge. She is a founder of an organization called Clean Start Kenya. It's Thursday. It's hashtag Justice Thursday. And to expand the conversation on Justice Thursday today, we want to look at babies behind bars. So there are very many children who are actually in Kenyan prisons, not because they have been found convicted and sentenced to prison, but because they are children of mothers who are in prison. Teresa, thank you very much for joining us. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. We call that the hot seat, but because we're talking about babies, we will not make it hot at all. We want to have an interesting, nice, and easy conversation.
Thank you, like children.
Yes. Tell us about the organization Clean Start.
Clean Start is an organization that we had the privilege and honor of setting up post our own experiences as mothers and women within the criminal justice system. So we've been through the arrest, prosecution, conviction with our own children, spent time at the different women prisons here in Kenya, and then got out, got together and said, because of the hardships we experienced, the injustices, and most importantly, what our children had to go through because of our own imprisonment, we've got to change things and make it right. And so Clean Start now works to empower women and children who are impacted by the criminal justice system in the country.
Tell us your own story.
I worked within the banking sector, and then I got arrested and fraudulently charged. And I say that because it was for a crime that I hadn't committed. The arresting officer knew very well I hadn't committed that crime, but continued with the prosecution. And I eventually got imprisoned for an entire year at Langata Women Maximum Prison. And I had just been blessed with my firstborn daughter. So I got to serve that sentence with my daughter. A very grueling journey. Through the court system and then our prisons, very tough, very retributive, and then very harsh when it comes to reintegrating back into society. But the impact continues as a mother trying to raise her children, even though I was exonerated, cleared and compensated. The impact continues with my children. So it's a lifelong journey.
The thing that let me rephrase this question. When you say it was difficult to be integrated back into society, what are some of the key things that made this integration difficult?
The stigma. People fear people coming out of prison for obvious reasons. Prisons are associated with criminals. So the stigma. You cannot easily get a certificate of good conduct, which is a requirement if you're looking for any employment. You do not have any capital. You are not earning any money from the day you got arrested all the way through the criminal justice system to prison. So you're coming out a beggar, you're dependent. And here you are, you need to pay rent, you need to buy food, you're a mother, you need to take care of your child. It becomes very difficult. Now, that's just the external. Internally, you're a broken shell. The trauma of what you've been through from the day you got arrested, going through that court system as a criminal, and then enduring the very retributive penal institution system.
I hope I won't be pushing the envelope too much, but could you talk a little bit about the retributive system that we have in our... Yes.
The prisons, are a product of, we took over from the British Protectorate when we gained independence. And that was founded on the British common law. So these prisons were ideally, from the buildings themselves, were built by the Brits. And like in most African nations that were colonized, these are buildings that were set up for people who would resist colonialism, colonial rule. And so, and they were very much geared towards the male population. So coming into this system as a female, in the very first place, they don't cater for the distinctive needs of a female, right from the police cells. As a female, it doesn't cater for you. And then the training is it's very punitive.
The training of the officers.
Of the officers,
Yes.
to put in custody these people who are coming in. It's very punitive. And so you come into this system that's not looking at you as a human being, so to speak. It's looking at you as someone who is a danger to society. Now, unfortunately, a huge percentage of those coming into these institutions, unfortunately, are not criminals. They are petty survival offenders. And for some of us, we are victims of the justice system. You've not committed any crime, but because of the injustices within our criminal justice system, you find yourself in this situation. The food you eat, where you sleep, prison is meant to break you. So from the building, from the way you're treated, the language, the culture, everything is meant to break you.
Okay. So, I mean, as you speak about this, Teresa, now, with that as an individual, and then here we are introducing children into this. So we already know what happens if you have been convicted in this country as a woman, and let's say you were pregnant at the time of conviction, you will deliver your baby within the system. If you have been convicted at the time where you have a small child under a certain age, you will then serve your sentence with your child. Now, having seen that there are certain provisions that are hugely lacking within the system, how much more then are we looking for that for which is provided for a child? Because this is not the first time that this has been covered. We saw the story that, was reported in the Standard a few days ago, but we've seen stories over the last 10 years easily about the state of children in prisons. What is or not provided for kids?
We are a nation that's acting blind to these children because they are there. Women are coming into prisons pregnant. Women are coming accompanied by their children 0 to 4 years to prison. And women are leaving their children on the outside. Before I answer your question, Ndu, I'd like to shed some light on some statistics from our studies. 90% of the women who are in our penal institutions are single and the sole breadwinners of their families. 60% of their children are below the ages of 10 years. Of the women who come into prison, they're allowed to be accompanied by their children who are aged 0 to 4 years. So the other children above the age of 5 are left on the outside. And 39% of the imprisoned mothers do not know the whereabouts of their children from the point of the arrest. So there are these children, that we have left, whether accompanying their mothers to prison or left on the outside in very traumatic situations. When a woman is convicted, she's given a commuter warrant. That's what allows the officer in charge of the institution to admit this mother. The child does not have that. The commuter warrant, what it does, it gives accountability for the mother. But because the child does not have that, coming to your question, there's no one who's accountable for this child.
In prison?
In prison. They do not have a commuter warrant. The person who has been sentenced is the mother. That's the person who has been admitted to prison. But she's accompanied by this invisible person who's 0 to 4 years to prison.
So legally, there is no recognition that there is a 0 to 4-year-old child in prison.
Exactly. And that's where things like the food, proper food, when you think about the child, what they need, especially in the first 1,000 days of this child, which is the brain growth opportunity for any human being. That's the foundation. And whatever is done within this first 2 years of this child then determines the
Rest of their
lifespan.
life, yes.
Yeah. So when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to clothing, when it comes to the rights of this child growing up behind prison, there's no one you can go and
So the system, the law and the government does not recognize that there's a child who is maybe 3 months old, a year old in prison. So they don't provide for immunization services.
Right.
They don't provide for, even by the time they get to weaning, they don't provide for such. They don't provide for diapers and such.
they provide for the immunization. But when it comes to the other provisions, it's really dependent on well-wishers. And we know in this country, the Kenya prison sector is one of the most underfunded sector, even for the adults who they're responsible for. How much more so for children who it's a favor for them to accompany their mother to prison. And what really, really hurts, because we're not saying that if you commit a crime, you should not be culpable and responsible for the consequences. The painful part is that a majority of these women are being taken to prison for very petty, mundane reasons. For example, she stole something from her employer because the employer did not pay her salary on time. She was hawking in the streets because she didn't have a license. She was loitering. Now, these crimes essentially warrant a less than 3 years in prison. In essence, by law, they are fit for an uncustodial sentence and a community service order. Imagine the cost of putting this woman behind bars because she did not wear a mask, because there are women behind bars for 5 to 6 months because they were caught without a mask and they couldn't raise a bail of 20,000 bob, vis-a-vis this woman being left to buy a mask or being enabled and supported
For 10 shillings.
and continue taking care of her children. But now she's being separated from her children because of this mask. And the children, that spiral effect continues. Have we empowered these women? Have we empowered these women by taking them to prison because they were hawking without a license? We cannot arrest, prosecute, convict our social issues. That's why prisons are full of the poor. Those who cannot afford legal representation, who cannot pay bail. And then our children, a whole generation is going through very severe and traumatic issues because we've criminalized poverty. And that's the hurtful part.
Teresa, there's some statistics that you've given us of, for example, 90% of the women in prison today are single and they were the sole breadwinners for their families. 60% of their children who are not in prison are under 10 years. You've told us that out of the women in prison, 39% don't know the whereabouts of the children that they left outside. So they don't know. Now, do we have statistics of the number of children who have accompanied their parents to prison?
We don't have the statistics, but they range from anywhere between 500, the number keeps going up and down.
So at least 500 children.
500, sometimes it drops down to 200, 300. It keeps rising and falling depending on admissions and releases.
And this is across the country, or are we talking about particular facilities?
It's across the country.
How many women prisons do we have?
34 women prisons.
So in 34 women prisons, we have at least 100 children who
Minimum.
are not criminals who are in prison.
Yes.
With their mothers.
At any given time.
At any given time.
Yeah.
It's a very high number.
Very high number. And to imagine the future and to imagine they're coming in and leaving, coming in and being admitted. And this is the other thing. 2020, 2021, the numbers of imprisoned women went down because of COVID-19. But immediately 2022, COVID has now come down, the numbers rise up. Why? Has crime increased? Did we have a problem in 2020, 2021 when these women who are trying to fend for their children were within us in community and society? It doesn't add up.
Of the numbers that are in prison, because you've also talked about a majority of the women who are in prison were petty offenders, and they're there for, those short jail sentences. Do you have the numbers for that?
Of the petty offenders?
Yes.
They range between 60 to 70% of the population at any given time.
And by petty, we are talking about a jail term of how long?
A minimum between 6 months to a maximum of 3 years.
What I found, which is of interest in what you're saying, do we have cases or do we have data or information about people who have received non-custodial sentences in this country?
They are there. There are few. We're still collecting this data and this evidence. We're about to release our first research project in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So that's the problem. Data has been a big issue in this space. So even for us to prove what our experiences were has taken a while, because this is not an area that is funded and resourced. So very soon we'll have that data, but there are very few, because our courts overuse custodial sentencing.
Do we even have a structure that would be able to accommodate non-custodial sentences?
It's there. And if
Is it breathing? Is it alive?
it's there.
It's limping.
We could do better. We could definitely do better. And if we could put the focus that we're putting in custodial sentences in the non-custodial sentencing, and I'm very grateful because they're very forward and progressive judicial officers, the likes of Honorable Senior Resident Magistrate Kibosia, Honorable Dr. Alice Masharia, whose book I have come with today, who's written an amazing book, Rights of the Child, Mothers, and Sentencing, the case of Kenya. These are amazing judicial officers who we are working with to see to it that we implement non-custodial sentencing in a way that works. And this is what we're saying at Clean Start. If we have been able to empower close to 1,000 imprisoned women and support them in their reintegration, but our efforts are being watered down by the constant bringing in of petty offenders, then we get overwhelmed. We could curb this at the point of arrest, work with the national police, work with the chiefs and the local administrators and say, if this Mama Mboga did not have a license, if she didn't have a mask, there is a way of resolving this issue and not taking it all the way to prosecution and the courts, because that's not a solution. It's only tearing apart this family. And so empowering them while they're still on the outside, because once they go through that system, then the trauma, by the time you heal the trauma that this woman has gone through, I'm telling you, the detrimental trauma that the children who have been left on the outside, because right now we're talking about the hundreds of children accompanying their mothers in prison. The children left on the outside, because they are in the thousands. This woman has 2 to 3 children, so most of them are left on the outside, raising themselves. In that house, they can't pay rent. They're the ones who end up in the streets, raped, dropping out of school, substance use, and so on and so forth. It's crippling, just to be decent.
So we're having a conversation with Teresa Njoroge. She's the founder of an organization called Clean Start Kenya. This is an organization that brings together women who have gone through the prison system or those who are still in the prison system and looking at how to support them. This conversation today, Justice Thursday, is about babies behind bars. These are children below the age of 4 who have accompanied their mothers to prison, not because they are criminals, the children, but because they basically needed to go with their mothers to prison. And then let's also talk about the children who were left by these mothers who go to prison. 90% of women, according to the statistics we've been given by Teresa, who are in prison were actually single parents and the sole breadwinners. So what happens to the children that have been left outside of the prison system? From your statistics, what have you seen about the children who were left behind by their parents, who then went to prison? what becomes of those children? Maybe you can even give us some stories of the women that you are members of the Clean Start and their own stories. When they went to prison and they had left their children out, how did they find their children?
It's devastating, and it's sad to say that I'm lost for choice of which stories to give, because there are just so many. One of our team members was in prison for a period of 6 months because of a debt, which she eventually ended up paying. And this debt, she incurred it because her husband had a heart condition. And so she was trying to sort that out, and may her husband's soul rest in peace. She ended up, being taken to prison because she was lagging behind with this debt. To date, even post coming out of prison and being separated with her daughter, paying for that debt, to date, she has still not been able to get back with her daughter. Why? The family that took her daughter, her daughter really bonded with the other children in that family. And so separating that child then affects this child even further. So that's an impact that continues on post the 6 months, and a debt that eventually got paid. Another one got into prison because of buying a second-hand phone, which was involved in a robbery case. Eventually, it was established she had just bought a second-hand phone. She had been in prison for 1.5 years. She was a business second-hand clothes dealer. Left behind 3 children as a single mother. Those children lived in the streets. The firstborn son was raped while he was in the streets. The secondborn, and these children dropped out of school, trying to move from one place, from one den to the next, with their little daughter, as mom was behind bars for 1.5 years. It took years for this lady to rebuild her life when she got out, fast looking for her children, where they went to. I could give a case of a woman who's still in prison 22 years later, who gave birth, left her 6-year-old daughter on the outside, and went into prison, was convicted pregnant, gave birth to the boy who's now on the outside. The daughter is now 27 years old. She's done well because she's graduated with a communication degree, again through well wishers. But the son, who was born in prison, has dropped out of school, and we're being unable to support him finish his Form 4. Why? The adverse childhood experiences. He's now into drugs. We're trying to put him in school. It's such a challenge. The effects. I could talk about stories on and on and on about these women. I must talk about the gains, though.
Yes.
Because we've got amazing people. For example, the late, may his soul rest in peace, Father Peter Mainberg, a Catholic priest who, post my imprisonment, went to Langata Women Maximum Prison and built the first child daycare, so that these children could then have a space where they go to outside the prison walls, and they can see color, they can grow up. Because my daughter, immediately we got out of prison, anytime she would see anyone with other clothes, because she was used to the zebra, prison, exactly. So all these other clothes and the color really, really made her uncomfortable, because those children grow up thinking prison is the world. This is life. Then when they come out into this world, they're like, where is this you've brought me? But Father Peter built the first daycare at Langata, which gives children a good start. And then I must talk about the Africa Early Childhood Network, AFCEN. They've come in, they've partnered with us and other key stakeholders, and we're coming up with the first childcare policy for Kenya Prison Service that will manage, and it's a framework that will help the service handle these children. So there are some strides, beautiful strides and achievements that we've achieved. But it can never
How about
and I
prisons
appreciate
authorities?
that.
Is there something positive that you can say that the prisons authorities have done over the years to also, start, even if it's informally, recognizing the children, supporting the mothers who are there with their children?
Indeed, a lot, because even we through the very difficult circumstances were supported by the warders the best they could with the little they have to take care of our own children.
And where
you
is
know?
this little they have coming from? Because as you say that now, I'm thinking prison warders obviously in the women's prison are women, and likelihood that they have their own family. So there's a bit of a sensitivity, or at least empathy, that comes from them. But like you say, this little they have, is it coming from their personal own that they then share, or is it from a kitty that's available within the system? What are we talking about?
Yes, I know of prison officers who have gotten into their pocket to get those diapers, to get that milk, and to get whatever it is they can get for these children. Plus, I do know of well-wishers, faith-based organizations, different civil society organizations, individuals who come together and bring dignity packs for these children, the Vaseline, the soap, the diapers, the green gram flour, the porridge flour, and donate to the church, to the churches come and donate to the prisons so that these children can get, some decent nutrition and comfort as they grow up. So it's well-wishers who come in and support prisons. And I would urge the society. There's a prison near you in the 47 counties, a woman prison. Go in there, offer help, offer support. These are our sisters. These are our aunties. These are our members of this society who have been put into prison. So we need to do something.
Obviously, you've had engagement with the law, even as you have come out, and in the work that you've done, the engagement is beyond civil society or those who are, helping out. And there has been legal processes that you've had engagement with. What is the status of the, yes, they've been called forgotten or invisible. But is there at least the recognition that something ought to be done about these children who are in, and also those ones who have been left out when their mothers are incarcerated?
Yes, there is. And I'm so grateful years later.
By government?
By government.
Okay.
And by government, I mean, for example, the Department of Children's Service, the Kenya Prison Service. Now, through partnership with stakeholders, they have admitted that indeed there is severe and very detrimental impact on these children, and these children in the very first place should not be here. So how is it that we can ensure that we get custodial, non-custodial sentencing for the mothers where possible, probation sentences where possible, but for those who are still within the system, this child care policy, the very first, 2021 to 2030, it should be launched in a few weeks. The very first will provide a framework of care. And I cannot forget of amazing partners such as the Kenya Pediatric Association, who have come on board as well to put their weight in to support these children. So there is admission, there is admission, and there is something that is being done for the very first time that we can say, at least there's a framework within which we can work to recognize these children and do something about it. Yeah.
How about with the justice system? So we've had conversations here with the executive director of the National Council on the Administration of Justice. It brings together people in the entire justice sector. Okay, so from the police through the judiciary, the DPP, the prison services, and then also brings in civil society organizations. So Clean Start, for example, would participate in these conversations where you raise these issues at the NCAJ or even starting from the court users committees, so that the judiciary, as we wait for ratification of the policy and all, what is it that the judiciary can start doing immediately and have conversations on? For example, that encouragement of non-custodial sentencing, special recognition of nursing mothers when you're sentencing, special recognition of pregnant women when you're sentencing, or women who can be proven to be the sole breadwinners, and then special recognition of that at sentencing stage. Have you engaged them?
We have, and we're very grateful for the listening ear and the progression with which they are taking this matter. And we must also appreciate the fact that our Honorable Chief Justice Martha Koome has heart for these children and children generally who are impacted by the criminal justice system, and is doing something about it. So we believe in a few years we'll see a big change. And I must say, even before they get to the judiciary, we can go a step further. The police, at the point of arresting this woman, on that charge sheet or the arrest sheet, you can ask this woman, are you a mother? Are you pregnant? How many children do you have?
Do they have a caregiver?
Is there a caregiver who can be left with your children? Because when you arrest me and you don't care whether I am pregnant, if you arrest me today as Teresa Njoroge today, you're not just arresting Teresa Njoroge. The impact of you arresting me will also fall on my 2 children. So they should be factored in. At the point when I was arrested and was going through the court case and going into prison, I was pregnant and had a child. That should have been a factor. Being, okay, to them, they found, in the very first instance, they said that I was a criminal before I got exonerated. They should have factored in, I have never had any other, it's a first time. Exactly. So those kinds of things should be factored in. Has this woman ever been involved in any criminal activity before? Is she pregnant? Is she a mother? They should be factored in, so that when the magistrate has that file, they know that this is not just Teresa Njoroge. This is Teresa Njoroge, she's pregnant, or she has an infant, or she's leaving behind 4 children. And at that point, make that decision and issue a statement that as she's going in for a custodial sentence, there are 4 children being left behind, and I would like these 4 children taken into X institution for care. So right now, there's nothing like that. They're just left by themselves, or I consider Teresa Njoroge is pregnant and I will defer her sentence for a year or 2 years for her to go give birth, and then we will take up this matter after 2 years. Or, given the nature of the nonviolent crime of not having a mask, or of fighting about a hanging line for clothes, or that she was loitering, or she had brewed changa. This is non-violent. So there's no need, she's no harm to society. So I'm going to give her an uncustodial sentence. All those things can be taken into consideration if at the point of arrest, our police capture all that.
Do we need a law for that? Because when you speak to judicial officers, magistrates and judges, they say, we are confined by what the law tells us to do. Do we need a law to come in place and say, this is the information that shall go into a charge sheet?
Yes. They can, and the judicial officers can bring about that. We are reformists, surely, as a nation. If we are seeing, we who are grown-ups, what the impact of our decisions is having on our children who are under our care. These children are looking up to us, the decisions we make. Then for crying out loud, those are the decisions that we can and should come up with.
Teresa, when in your organization and in your interaction with other groups of individuals and institutions, do you also interact with politicians? Let me explain to you why I'm asking the question, okay? We've been looking and discussing a very interesting matter that relates very directly to our electoral laws and how our politicians have managed to change it rather considerably. In fact, we haven't quite absorbed the import of it. But had this thing come in 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been looking at it in the same way I'm looking at it now, 5 months to an election. But these are the people who change our laws. So if you want changes or a structure that you can bring forth your suggestions on, if it isn't anchored in law, it gets tricky. The magistrates, judges, their hands are tied. Okay? But if there's a law that goes into some nitty-gritty details that caters to some of these things, it becomes a lot easier for someone to make a case for these things. But if it isn't there, it's tricky. So,
thank you.
Talk to politicians.
We will.
Engage them more.
We will.
Yes.
We definitely will. We're still young. We started with the survival bit of things. You know, we're coming out of prison. We don't have food. Bus fare is an issue. Rent. You know, survival. But we're at a place and a situation, even as an organization, where we can now sit on the table and say and engage the politicians to change the laws. So the systemic bit, and it's part of our strategic objective. So we're keen on that.
One of the interesting things I found out when talking to people who work in the prison services, what is contained as part of their procurement for things that, for instance, I'm talking specifically about food that people should eat and what people actually eat. Two very different things. But this is something that runs across many government institutions, whether it is schools, whether it is hospitals. Again, the same group of people can be very instrumental in ensuring certain things are done. In the absence of that legal structure, a lot of the changes that we're talking about become very difficult. If it's there, a judge will look at it, they will know, and they can easily say, now, this is how we're going to enforce it. Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. Thank you for that. We will keep pursuing at it, you know, in collaboration with the judicial officers who we have approached and are in agreement, and other players, and engage the lawmakers. Because as you say, if we put it and it's law, whether it's Teresa, whether it's Ndu, whoever it is, it's law. And that's how they'll be treated in future. So we will pursue that. Yeah.
Let's do something we hardly do on the show. Actually, I think we've never had this on the show. Listen, today as we speak, there are over 100 children who are in prison. They are not prisoners. They are there accompanying their mothers. Okay? And like you're saying, there's nothing in law that says you shall give them diapers, you shall give them special diet, you shall give them this and the other provisions. So your organization then, I'm sure, is involved in trying to support these children who are in prison.
Yes.
So how do you raise your funds? How do you raise this kind of support?
We fundraise locally and internationally. We speak to faith-based organizations, to corporate bodies, individuals, whoever can support in whichever little way, to buy a diaper, to buy flour that we can take into prisons, porridge flour, to buy, you know, the essentials for a child, their panties, children clothes, whatever a child needs, whoever can donate that, whether in cash or in kind, can drop at our offices, in Westlands at School Lane, number 31, or we've got a pay bill number 543268, and on that pay bill number send some donation, and accounts say it's for the children. We then put the donations together and distribute them across the women prisons, Kajiado, Kapenguria, Narok, Busia, Wundanyi, wherever. And they reach these children. And Kenya prisons have an open door policy. You know, they have an open door policy, and they accept and they say, yes, for the sake of these children, we will accept these things so that the children have a good beginning.
So people can donate directly to your organization.
Yes.
And that's coming to your office in Westlands.
Yeah.
Or what's that pay bill number again?
543268.
543268.
Yes.
But also at the same time, you've said, if people just went directly to a women's prison
Yes.
and say, I've got children's clothes here and I'd like to donate to the children who are here, the prison's authorities are ready to take.
Yes, they do. They have an open door policy, and they accept the donations on behalf of the children.
What are the most pressing needs currently?
It's the panties, you know, the diapers for the children, definitely the food. So I'll talk about the porridge flour, green gram flour, fruits, eggs. Those are the basic needs. Vaseline, soap for bathing that child. Those are some of the most pressing needs for these children. Yeah. Yeah, and clothes. You know, a mother has come into prison pregnant. She definitely was not coming to the maternity ward.
Yep.
She needs something to cover her child with, and the clothes. And it's not like she's working and earning, and there are some shops nearby to buy these things. No, you know, unless you come and bring them, she has nothing to fold her child for her child in. You know, some warm clothing for this child. Not their crime, yet their sentence.
What has been the response so far locally? Good, bad, medium, growing, declining?
Growing, 1. 2, medium. And I say medium because I know we could do better. But we're so grateful because people are committed and are doing something.
Would you say that, okay, the question is, do you have people who donate and support your program from outside the country?
Many.
Many.
Actually, 3/4 of how we survive as an organization is the support we get from the US and the UK.
It can get better.
Yep.
It can get better, even as we say this. But I think there's the two different worlds here that we are looking at in order to come together to make the situation better. That we know that a criminal justice system exists by necessity in this country because there will be crimes. There will also be unfair imprisonments, unjust imprisonments. And then there will be these children who suffer a sentence even though the crime was not their own. It can get better, but then even as you say this, the unrelenting voice then also continues to need to be there. From when you started until now, are you seeing a greater push? And I go especially by the state to have the situation improve, or at least to say that those who then make the law will make sure that it is put in to ensure that these ugly situations don't continue.
Yes, and we saw that a lot last year when the president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta himself, mandated that this Kenya Prisons childcare policy framework be effected, you know, immediately, as quickly as possible. So it's at that level now. And for that, we're very grateful that the leader, the leader of this country, His Excellency the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, has this on his radar and has directed. And if the authority is coming from that level, then we have every faith and belief that it's trickling down. And indeed, we are seeing the impact and the changes that are happening. And for that, we're grateful.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.